Alright, so we are on the draw again, but got a 1-drop, a 2-drop, and a 3-drop. So that's good. We've got all of our colors of mana, no actual manland until now. We drew a Hissing Quagmire. So, just going to start off with an Expedition Envoy and see what's going on our opponent's side of the table, as all we're seeing right now is a forest. And so next turn we'll have the option of if we want to play an Envoy or play Zulaport Cutthroat. One of the advantages to play the Envoy is we can play a Hissing Quagmire as well to go along with it. So it's a pretty close decision, but I think we do just play the Expedition Envoy and then the Hissing Quagmire. This way, if we draw a Collected Company, we can cast it on turn 4. And it looks like our opponent's on green-white tokens, and that's kind of the downside. Our Envoy's got Declarations, but not too upset about it. Even though it was kind of a 2-for-1, we can potentially use these clues later. And our Drana's Emissary is our biggest threat in our hand. So, yeah. The Lambhold Pacifist also was pretty much stopping our envoys from being able to attack. But if this is like a Dramoka's command, okay, so that's actually really bad for us. Because now this pacifist can get in. And we're a little bit on the back foot. But it looks like our opponent missed a land drop. So if we pass here, it's going to mean this Lambhold Pacifist would flip. So I think we just run out the Collected Company right away in this instance. And let's see what we connect on. Alright, it looks like a Serene Steward and Drana's Emissary, which isn't a bad combination to hit. They work well together. The Drana's Emissary triggers, and then the Serene Steward triggers, and then we can put a counter on something if we want to. So if our opponent attacks with the Pacifist, we're just going to take it. The alternative would be to double block, but that doesn't seem like our best option. We would lose our 2 creatures for our opponent's creature. And, okay, this could be a Dramoka's command, maybe, but that's just a ton of removal. Bad news for us. So, we drew an Anguished Unmaking. So, one play we could make would be to Anguished Unmaking this Lambhold Pacifist. Another play is we can just play 2 copies of Zulaport Cutthroat here. And then have the Anguished Unmaking at the ready. So both of those plays are... I think it's pretty close between both of those plays, but I'm just going to play both Zulaport Cutthroats and hope not to die, just because Anguished Unmaking is one of our most powerful cards in the matchup. And the Zulaport Cutthroats can potentially help us to gain some life, but this Lambhold Pacifist, it's a scary beater, and I think we're just going to take one more hit from it. That's going to put us all the way down to 6, though. And here's a second Pacifist. Wow. And we drew a second Zulaport Cutthroat. So this is a pretty interesting spot. I think we just want to play this... Sorry, the third Zulaport Cutthroat. And pass the turn here. That lets us hold up the Anguished Unmaking. And, okay, so it looks like our opponent actually has Dromoka's command here. So we can respond to that now with the Anguished Unmaking. And that's going to put us all the way down to 3. So now we have a bit of a choice here. But I think we just want to attack with all of our creatures. We're dying to a declaration anyways. And it's pretty unlikely our opponent has the 4th Dromoka's command. So we want to start trying to get aggressive to close the game out. Here's a Nissa. So it looks like that's just going to generate a plant here. And, okay, also a Hangerback Walker. So we are forced to make this block. And unfortunately, we don't have mana up to be able to use the Serene Steward. And we still haven't really had time to cash in these clues, and it doesn't look like we're going to anytime soon, since we just drew a Collected Company. So here, we can just try to put pressure on Nissa by attacking Nissa with all of our creatures. That's definitely one viable option. Our opponent could then block a Zulaport Cutthroat with Hangerback Walker, but that doesn't seem all that bad for us. So, yeah, I think I like that the most. We're just going to attack Nissa with all of our creatures. And, okay, so it looks like our opponent's electing to simply block the Serene Steward and take 2. So I think we're okay with that exchange. And just going to pass the turn now. The Pacifist is going to flip, but that's not really that relevant at this point. Alright, Hangerback for 2. We'll see if our opponent just passes here or wants to make some sort of attack. But pretty smartly, our opponent's just going to pass. So I like just casting our Collected Company. And we have found a couple of flying threats, which is good. So we're just going to go ahead and grab those. The Emissary is going to trigger here. And we can use the Serene Steward to give it a counter, which is pretty nice. And we actually drew March from the tomb. That's pretty funny. So we basically have 5 or 6 damage rather, because the Drana is going to put a +1/+1 counter on each of our attacking creatures. So I don't think there's a real reason to try to get fancy here. So if we just attack, we could actually attack Nissa, but there's not really a ton of value to doing that unless our opponent draws Westvale Abbey. So that's probably enough of a reason to go after Nissa. if our opponent draws Westvale Abbey, they could flip the Abbey right now. So we're going to attack Nissa with Drana. And then just attack our opponent with the Liberator. And then that's going to set up the win next turn, basically. Because we do have March from the Tombs available to us. And of course, our opponent is unable to block here. And so we're just going to pass. And another Nissa is not going to be good enough here. Alright, this attack with everything basically does nothing. So, yeah, we're just going to go ahead and block everything. Our opponent has no cards in hand. So, the only way we could potentially have lost in this scenario would be to randomly try to kill a Hangerback Walker, but obviously we weren't going to do that, so we're just going to untap and attack. So, pretty interesting game there against green-white tokens. Our deck is pretty well set up for this matchup, game one, in terms of we don't really want to board that much for the matchup. I like boarding in the third March because our opponent is likely going to board in some sort of mass removal. We also want the third copy of Anguish Unmaking. I like the Duress, and then we're going to board in the Shambling Vents as well. And so, cards we can take out here. Serene Steward is a card that could be on the chopping block. I don't normally mind shaving one Drana, and then Cutthroat's just kind of a card where you can shave a couple. It was good in that game, though. It may be that we just don't want to cut him. Serene Steward we can shave on. And I do like Cutthroat a reasonable bit here. So, it may be that we just want to maximize our Cutthroats here. And if we choose to do that, Lantern Scout is actually kind of hard to make good use of. So we're just going to take out our Serene Stewards and try to win in the air, basically. I think I like this the most of our options. Sometimes it's pretty hard to make headway on the ground, as we saw in that match. And so being able to Coco into those Drownas, that was really important. And, alright, so this hand is a one-land hand, so we are going to have to ship it, most likely. It does allow us to play Expedition Envoy and Sylvan Advocate and Calastra Healer, given if we draw one more land, so it's kind of close. But I think we're just going to mulligan here. And, unfortunately, this is one of those things I mean, we have a lot of lands in our decks, 26 lands, but this is just one of those things that happens. We're going to keep this, but it's not great. We need to draw more lands. I just don't like going to 5. If we draw another land, we can start deploying our hand. We've got some flying threats, but it may just be that we get mana screwed and lose this game. That's very possible. It's not that this mana base is bad, it's just that we haven't drawn our lands, so that happens. So yeah, I mean, part of the game, we had a one-land hand to begin with, and we had a 1-land hand on 6, and with a scry, we're more likely to draw the land on 6. So yeah, we just drew a land, so we're gonna try to get back into it, but it's not gonna be easy. Gonna start on Calastra Healer, but it looks like this could be a Dromoka's command from our opponent, which is pretty bad news. The other option would have been Zulaport Cutthroat to play there, but Calastra Healer has the highest upside because we wanted to be able to play our Drana's Emissary next turn. Unfortunately, things did not work the way we wanted to, and now we're stuck just running out a Zulaport Cutthroat on this turn. And it looks like our opponent is having no trouble hitting land drops. So this attack put us all the way down to 5, and now we're playing Cutthroat. If our opponent has Avacyn, the game's just over. We're going to game 3, if that's the case. And, yep, okay, we are dead. So, got a game 3 on our hands. Wasn't the most exciting game, but sometimes those happen. We can now reconsider our plan for game 3. For instance, I like just having the 4th Drana on the play. The Cutthroats are a little bit less impactful, so we can just switch those out for Serene Steward on the play, because the Steward is the more aggressive card, and Cutthroat's the more controlling card. It helps us go long against our opponent. But I think we just want 3 Serene Stewards and then just boarding back in the Scout. And this seems good. So, we do have lands. Having lands is a good sign. We're going to keep it. And it looks like our opponent is mulliganing, so it's now their turn to mulligan a little bit. And we've got a nice start. We don't have a 2-drop in our hand, but we can just play our Shambling Vents on turn 2. And we've got our choice between the 2 flyers for turn 3. So we'll see if our opponent has something like a Hangerback Walker for this turn. And the answer is yes. Our opponent does have a Hangerback Walker. So we're fine with trading the Expedition Envoy for this Hangerback Walker, if that's what our opponent wants to do. But it is not. So we now have the choice between Drana and, well, between both Dranas, I should say. I think I want to start with the Liberator. It just has the higher upside potential, because it can snowball, get out of control. But our opponent has just gotten rid of it with Declaration, so that's a bit unfortunate. And it looks like our opponent's just immediately making their Hangerback Walker bigger here. So even though our opponent mulliganed, they still have spells, still have lands. It's still a game. And we're just going to attack here and pass the turn. With Collected Company available to us. And we'll see what this ends up being. It's another Hangerback Walker. That makes sense. And so we are just going to deploy a Collected Company here. And we got a pretty good hit here in Calastra Healer and Drana. And so we're going to get the double trigger from our healer. We have another healer in hand. And actually we drew yet another healer. So we're just going to run these guys out there. Going to get a ton of triggers here. And there's really not a need to attack with anything other than the Drana. We could attack with Expedition Envoy. And there's a reasonable reason to do that, just to play around wrath effects. We could attack with everything here. So if our opponent has a card like Tragic Arrogance, that is pretty bad news for us. But we still have March to get everything back. It's a pretty close decision in terms of if we want to swing with everything or not. And I think we just want to attack with the Drana. There's no real reason to start gambling here. And let our opponent have flying blockers for our Drana. So, if our opponent has a sweeper, we still have the March. So, either way, we're in good shape. And it's kind of curious that our opponent's attacking us. Not too sure what this could possibly mean. It likely means like a Dramoka's command. But there's no real need to make any sort of block here. We're just going to take the damage. Think we're in a pretty commanding position no matter what our opponent has. Avacyn, yeah, so our opponent's just conceding, so